We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
1, 2, 3, listen.
Welcome to Finances, your home for all things financial, investment, money and lifestyle. Hosted and curated by the very talented team of certified financial planners at Burke Britton Financial Partners. This is the Finances podcast. Today we've got a couple of guests. Adam Woke, CEO of Cottage by the Sea. Adam, welcome.
Thank you, Jake.
We've got Queenscliff resident and what else?
Almost. Point Lonsdale.
Point Lonsdale, but well, you're Queenscliff legend. What are you?
Footballer. Not
Football.
quite legend.
Oh, well, it's your neck of the woods. So Adam's the CEO of Cottage by the Sea. Adam, I've got a little bio here for Cottage by the Sea. I might read it and then you can just fill the gaps in for what I've actually missed. So sure. Cottage by the Sea is an Australian children's charity that aims to give more children more opportunities to have fun, be inspired and broaden their horizons. Have I got that?
That pretty much captures it, yeah. After 133 years of doing the same thing, that mission statement hasn't changed, and yeah.
So the second part of that was founded in 1890, which is staggering. It's pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, it's amazing. There were two elderly ladies who sailed through the Heads in 1890, and they spotted that block of land there and thought, wouldn't that be a great place to try and help children? Spent 5 years on the back of a horse and cart to raise the original funds to build the first building. And
so let's start there. I do also want to start with a little bit of your background, but you said just before we jumped on that you don't particularly like telling us about yourself. But let's start with that history, because it's a unique history of Cottage by the Sea. So who were the two ladies and how did this go from time of founding to where we are today in quick time?
So briefly then, Jay, yeah, look, two old ladies, they sailed across from the UK. They were involved with the Ministering Children's League. That ended up in a number of different countries around the world, and we are the only one of those organisations that still operate to this day. They did an amazing job setting it up. In the 1930s, the original timber building was knocked down and rebuilt in the building we are in now, and that was refurbished in 2020 to reach more children. Obviously,
that need has changed considerably over the last 130 years. What have been... Obviously, in that time, we've had a couple of world wars and many incidents or events that have impacted communities. The focus has always been on kids.
Absolutely, 100%. Yep, that's never changed. In fact, we're really lucky that, well, really fortunate for many reasons, not just the location, but we get children coming back after. I had a lady turn up that she was there as a result that she was suffering after the Second World War. I won't actually talk about her ailment at the time, but 85 years later she turned up again. First visit back since, and she actually went down the slide.
Yeah, wow. I saw that video.
Did you see that?
Yeah. I think something, when me and Peter went through, something that stayed with me was, I can't remember if it was you that said, but the simple message was fresh food, fresh air for the kids, something simple that makes such a big difference when they're exposed to it.
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, we're lucky to have a lot of fresh air, and we're incredible work around the fresh food side of things as well. That's really important to us. Healthy gut, healthy mind. It's amazing how much that simple premise actually works. Thank you for the coffees.
Thanks, Amy.
Just walked in.
Thank
you. But the programs do run much deeper than that as well. Quite simply, our Take a Break program. Very lucky enough to have Deakin University actually working with us now on the impact of that program to dig deeper than fresh food, fresh air. But that does sum up a lot of what we do.
There was a bunch on the website, which we'll get to. There's a number of programs that Cottage by the Sea actually run and operate. At what point were those programs formalised? Has that been in the last decade or two, or has for 100 or so years, was it a fairly informal arrangement of kids having a respite or having a place to come that's safe and offered them food and fresh air?
Yeah. That's it. Great question. Formalised over the last 15 to 20 years, where they really started to structure the program. It evolved from fresh air, fresh food, which was the essence of it all for the first 100 years. Bring the children out there, offer them fun, offer them opportunities that they don't ever get. Go out to see the dolphins, swim with the Australian fur seals, for example. Go fishing, take fishing rods home. That's been in existence for a long, long time. But the programs have evolved very much over the last 15 to 20 years. My predecessor, Tony Featherstone, fantastic fella, started to do that. Working with Kathy Freeman as well. She was our patron at the turn of the century. I think we all know something else happened in 2000 as well involving Kathy. Amazing woman. She was 12 years as patron. Also set up her own foundation, Kathy Freeman Foundation. It's now evolved over the last 12 months to the Community Spirit Foundation, and we still work with those amazing people in that organisation with far-flung communities, far-flung in Northern Territories in Queensland. That's an evolution of program, which is why I'm talking about that. But also the Reef and the Mentor program, where children get the opportunity to come back for 36 different incrementally designed program opportunities from year 6 through to year 7 and then 8 through to year 12. And that really is exceptional. Not many places in the country offer anything like that.
Now, to have an organisation that's got the ability to offer that many programs requires a community, requires a community, a lot of people's input. In the last, say, 15 years particularly, what have been the major involvements of local community or local people that have allowed you to operate so many of the, what do we call them? I've lost my train. Programs, that's the word. The programs that you offer at the moment.
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, particularly coming from the background of having no government funding for those programs at all. We do need to raise a lot of money every single year to bring those 1,500 to 2,000 children through every year. Any key moments? The annual fair is always a good one. That's a big fundraiser for us. It's the second week or second Saturday. Have I got that right? Second Saturday. You better check that on the website if you're listening to this. It's the second weekend of the year, each year, and it's historically our largest fundraiser. But we've had a number of great local ambassadors have come on board as well. The support and passion that they give us spreads the word of what Cottage is and what we do and how we change lives. And that's the reason I'm here talking to you guys as well today. So thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it was. I was thinking about. It was you going to the event at Cottage by the Sea that prompted us to have this podcast, or was it the Future Generation program involvement?
I think it might have been the Future Gen, or maybe PB might have been at one of the events, but then I think me and Peter might have wanted an excuse to head down and have a look at the new facility, because I drove past every other day on the way to footy while it was getting redeveloped and putting on these extensions, and I thought, why not go and have a look and see what it's about.
Well, I'm glad you did, actually. Thank you.
Now, Adam, how long, let's talk a little bit about yourself briefly. How long have you been involved with Cottage by the Sea?
So Cottage by the Sea, I've been there for 4 years now. 3 years before that, I stood on the corner looking out over the water and then back at the building, and I said to some mates, that is a fantastic organisation. I'd love to work there one day. And then 3 years later, the job came up.
So where were you prior to Cottage?
Up in the High Country, another organisation working with children, vulnerable children. I was there for 12 years, and I've been in the sector for 20 years now.
Saw that. And so prior to that, you were in the High Country. Prior to the High Country, whereabouts were you in the sector? In the High Country, sorry. Prior to the High Country, where
Isle of Wight. So I worked with children in the Isle of Wight, and prior to that, outward bound, at a little place called Tharwa, which is about 35k out from Canberra.
Okay.
Awesome place near the Auroral Valley.
Now, you're a pretty well-travelled individual by the looks of it. Am I right in saying that you come from Dutch heritage and have spent a fair bit of time in Europe and South America?
Correct, yeah.
Do you mind if we go back away to when you were growing up? And let's go back to where you grew up. So you were born in the Netherlands and moved over to the UK. How old were you when you moved over to the UK?
I was very young. I was only one and a half when I moved to Northern Ireland. From there it was to Scotland, then the Middle East for a few years, and then near London.
And this was following your parents' work life? Were your parents in...
Oil.
They're in oil, okay. So I think you also, as you mentioned, that you're in funds management at some point. Is that right? You were.
Yeah, that was an interesting turn. I followed my law background because I did law and business at university, then law school, and ended up in London. And I wasn't really enjoying my journey into the legal profession. And I was at a quiz night in a pub one night, and a man tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I'd like to give you an interview for an investment management position." So I took that journey instead.
How long did you last in funds management?
I qualified after 2 years, and I lasted 10 months.
Okay. So, I mean, it's an interesting journey from, not only from location, but also occupation to where you find yourself today. What was the impetus for you to actually move into this sector and move into the I suppose, what do you call it? What do you call this sector? Is it the philanthropic space? Is it how do you define it?
So it's the charity sector, or not-for-profit, and specifically though vulnerable children.
So where was the impetus for you to move out of corporate world into the community sector that you're in at the moment?
Well, I'd already done 8 years in London, and that was about 8 years longer than I'd ever planned. It's amazing how time just gets behind you. I'd had a conversation with a friend one morning that it was time to move to Venezuela and look into the outdoors as an option.
Of course, that's what we all do, isn't it?
Yeah,
And,
happily.
Well, sadly he had an accident later that morning, and that really gave me the push that I needed to get on that journey. And then the Rugby World Cup brought me here in 2003.
So when did you move to Venezuela?
Can I ask if you remember what happened in 2003 at the
Yeah, I
Rugby
can.
World Cup?
What's his name? The little.
That's it. Yes.
Before my time.
Were we talking about Johnny?
Yeah,
Johnny
Johnny
Wilkinson.
Wilkinson. Yep, I remember where I was watching it at a mate's place just up in Drumcondra. It's pretty devastating, and I'm not even a big rugby union fan, but it was it pulled at the heartstrings a little bit like the cricket too. You can not watch it for a while, but if the Aussies are getting beaten, it's not much fun, particularly by the Brits.
But Venezuela was there in 2002.
Okay, and the connection with Venezuela, was that to have something to do with your parents' involvement with oil?
That was the cheapest ticket at the time.
Okay. And you mentioned in your bio that you have done some pretty interesting things, like being dropped off the top of a mountain. Tell us a little bit about that. What was the story there, being dropped into Guatemala and having to find your way out over the course of 5 days?
It was a new type of event. They've run a number of these type of events around the world and have done for 20, 30 years now. This one really interested me. The organiser had contacted me. I'd met her previously in the Amazon, as it happens, but she was running a new type of event that meant you start on top of a mountain with no food and no water, and a couple 100 kilometres later you need to find your way out through the jungle. And that's what we did. We found our way out. At times it didn't look like we would.
So what was the safety protocol with that? Was there a ripcord get me out?
We had an EPIRB, which we found out on day 3 wasn't working, so they replaced it. So we were glad we didn't need it. And that was pretty much the protocol, was that you're supposed to push a button and they'd come and get you out. We found out at that point. They've never run the race since, partly because of COVID, but I think the organisers backed away from it from a safety perspective.
Where does the passion come for that with the sort of endurance events, not only doing a marathon being 4 hours worth, but 4 or 5 days worth? Where does that come from?
The truth is, we're in an industry outdoors of pushing children. We ask them to step outside their comfort zones, and I think we live quite comfortable lives, and if we didn't step out of our comfort zones ourselves as a work team, I don't think we are being honest and fair. So I had a friend that called my bluff and said, I've signed myself up to this first event. This is the one in the Sahara, 240k in the Sahara Desert, Moroccan Sahara, and as I say, he called my bluff, and I thought, we've got to put my hand up as well.
How have those experiences informed, you sort of touched on it then, but informed the way you deal with kids dealing with challenging circumstances now?
It helps you to be honest, and I think that's the one. When you're working with children with vulnerability and some been through experiences in life, they have tough experiences, more challenging experiences than any of us. I would probably fairly say around this table, none of us have ever experienced, And I think it gives you the opportunity to reflect. We don't reflect often in life when you're on your own and you're 10 hours just slogging on a trail. You do start to reflect more on the things that matter in life. And for me, working with some children who've been through the very worst, It is where my passion lies. I find it easier to be honest. And you can just be open to them as well, even about their own experiences. If they open up to you about what they've been through, there's no harm in just being honest. You know, life's still going to deal its blows. Talking
about how kids present themselves to Cottage by the Sea, is there a particular demographic, or are you seeing a particular type of client or child experience that's presenting itself to you at the moment? Or,
definitely.
Yep. And so what is that?
Well, we're definitely seeing there's been a decline in mental health over the last couple of years. We've already been this is how we sort of got to talking to each other before we even came on air today. But definitely a decline in mental health, prevalence of people talking about self-harm and more. And I think that's true across all sectors and the whole world at the moment, actually, and we need to keep an eye out for each other. To what
degree do you think the decline in mental health is a decline in mental health either versus or as well as a greater recognition or acknowledgement of mental health as something that has always existed for individuals?
Yeah, I think both of those statements are true. I actually think life is becoming busier, though. I think, sorry, I'm giggling because it was a conversation I had recently about mobile phones, for example. I'm giggling because I'm sure people take them into the toilet with them these days. When do you get your space? When do you get your chance to actually think, you know, to yourself in your own little world?
When you go on a run for 6 days, you can.
Exactly. But that's why I was laughing, because it's toilet humour. I mean, who doesn't find that funny sometimes? But I just think people need to create space for themselves to be able to reflect. And I think the busyness of life that has been created by modern technology is adding to the complication now.
Is that where Cottage by the Sea goes? Is there phones, technology, TVs? Where does that sit with Cottage?
No, the children recognise that as part of the agreement, that there is no technology while they're with us. And I think that's healthy to have a week break, or, you know, for the kids who are lucky enough to be on the Reef and the Mentor program, it's 36 opportunities over the whole of the schooling life to understand you can survive without it for that period of time.
Yeah. Do you see the kids actually withdraw from, have withdrawal symptoms from technology?
I personally haven't here at Cottage, but I have in the past in my previous roles. But I have less one-on-one time with the children now than I have had in the past. I
kind of reflect on my kids, and at a smaller level, just the influence that technology has on them, and the impact on their emotional well-being, and how it definitely affects the regulation of their mood and their personality. And it's kind of insidious. It kind of creeps in and just becomes under the guise of convenience that we all sort of encouraged to believe that convenience is going to make our life somehow give us more time, when in fact, as you said, it takes time away from us and doesn't give us time to ourselves.
100% agree with everything you just said.
Yeah. What now are you personally doing to give yourself time and space? Are you still running? Are you still doing some of your adventure activities, or are you too consumed with everything to do with being a CEO at Cottage by the Sea?
I have been fairly consumed with the role, evolving the role through these challenging years, but we are coming through it. Sort of not answering your question, I guess, but Cottage has been really lucky again through these years. That, you know, we've had more children through program in the last 12 months than ever before. We've had the funding coming in, thankfully, and the staff are a happy crew of passionate people. So I've been really lucky with that. I probably do need to work on the structure a little bit at Cottage to help give myself a little bit more time and get away with the kids more, my kids.
You mentioned a couple of things there in terms of the programs and also funding. Can I just touch on the programs? Can we maybe talk specifically to some of the key programs that you've got happening at the moment, and how people find their way, how kids find their way to those programs?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's slightly different. I mentioned the Community Spirit Foundation earlier. Those children come to Cottage, or we join them in communities or at various cities around the country. Those children are governed by their involvement within community and school, and that's dictated outside of Cottage by the Sea. So that's the Community Spirit Foundation that take that on. And they use our staff for some facilitation skills. The take a break children, who generally come on a one-off opportunity, come to us. Usually the schools will contact us. We're fairly well known, obviously, now after 130 plus years. And we just check simply that they score below a certain level on the ICC's index, which is the Index of Community Education. I've stuffed that up, haven't I? The ICC is basically, it's about the opportunity.
International Cricket Commission.
Let's not get back into the cricket, but no. So it's about advantage in a particular community, and as long as they score below a certain level, they are considered within our realm. So we'll accept them to come on a program. And then the schools, if they're a small community school, like a lot of the bushfire impacted communities. You remember the bushfires back in 2019, 2020? Seems like a long time ago now. We made a commitment to reach into those communities, which we had some assistance through Salvation Army to open doors for us to talk to the principals. And we've now had 15 different schools from those communities come to us. We approach them. If they're small, the whole school can come, 20 or 30 kids.
What's the actual process of coming to Cottage by the Sea? What does it look like
Great
for
question.
the kids on day one?
So day one, a good example is the Far East Gippsland bushfire region that we drive out on the Sunday. We take our buses out there, the staff will stay overnight and be at school at 8 o'clock in the morning and drive the kids back to Cottage, and the same's done in reverse on the way home. We've got a school coming to us at the moment, Wedderburn coming down at the moment, and our buses are on the road right now. I think, well, they actually might have just arrived at Cottage. That's the start for us. Beautifully bright coloured buses with seatbelts and trained staff, one staff driving, one staff just managing the children on the bus. The pictures of children enjoying seals and dolphins on the outside. And then they arrive at Cottage, and walking into Cottage, as you can attest yourself, is an amazing feeling of joy in that first moment. You're greeted by a big colourful slide that comes from upstairs down into the foyer, and every single child's eyes are drawn to that colourful piece of equipment.
Even when you're coming in that driveway and you're just coming through and you see the playground, the basketball court, the sand pit and all that sort of stuff, and then you do manage to come inside and it's just straight out to the ocean. I think you mentioned how many kids haven't actually seen.
Well, something like 70% of the kids who come through have never been to the ocean or played on the beach, and that's a pretty shocking stat when you consider we're in Australia and we all live within a stone's throw of the beach. But
that might be worth touching on just in terms of the location of kids that find their way to Cottage. I must have wrongly assumed that we were limiting the breadth of exposure to kids of the Geelong and Greater Geelong region, but that region obviously expands obviously deep into central Victoria and beyond, because if kids haven't seen the beach, they're some distance away from Geelong.
That isn't necessarily true, but the vast majority do come from our local area, certainly the Bellarine Peninsula. But we reached out to Tasmania when they had the incident there with the trampoline a couple of years ago, to see if they would like us to send a team across and bring back the school kids to Cottage for a holiday. That hasn't eventuated. Recent bus tragedy, we've reached out to that school as well. I'm pretty confident we'll have those kids come to us, or a large contingent of those kids come to us. The vast majority come from our local area, but as I said, 15 schools from Far East Gippsland. But I had a principal from a Geelong school whose the majority of their children were only 3 suburbs back from the beach, and he said none of the kids had been to the beach, and he said their worlds pretty much were limited to school, the street they lived on, and the general shop, the general store, because they don't get the opportunity to go to the beach for one reason or another.
That's hard to wrap your head around, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's particularly when you're used to just disappearing down to the beach, eh?
Yeah, not too far away. I don't know how I'd venture out in the high country where you were previously, but it's a little bit unimaginable that you can't just walk there and enjoy a day down there.
Yeah, it's about opportunity, and children don't know what they don't know.
Talking about opportunity, the opportunity to put together so many of these programs is not an inexpensive thing to do.
No.
You mentioned funding before, and that you've been very fortunate with some of the funding that you've been able to receive. Where does the bulk of your funding come from? and where is the shortfall in funding to deliver some of the programs that you've got planned or that you already currently have in place?
All right, good question again. Thanks, Jay. Look, we get a lot of funding through trusts and foundations. That's really positive for us. We work on those relationships a lot. Great people. I've mentioned often how lucky we are at Cottage. We don't just see the joy on the kids' faces and the experiences they have, and them coming back after 85 years or decades later, but we also see amazing joy on donors' faces as well. It's not just the trusts and foundations, local community. You mentioned community. Without that community support, we don't exist. If there was a gap, that gap would be within corporations. So we'd like to grow that involvement with corporate groups. I'm here now with Burt Britton. It's great to have you guys here, and you're back on site with us again next week. Can't wait to see you in the ice bath.
Yes. Jay will be happy to do it. I'm less excited.
But so if there was a gap, it would be trying to explore that a little bit more, even whether if it was matched funding in certain bigger organisations, that would be awesome. But something we need to work on.
Yeah, having spoken to a number of charitable organisations over our journey on, we were fortunate enough through our Future Generation program to be able to very generously, our clients have been able to donate funds to a number of charities. And I think what we've recognised is that the Geelong community is a very giving community. It's an extremely giving community. But one of the challenges for organisations is to collaborate where they possibly can with like corporate organisations, because it's very easy for smaller charitable organisations to get drowned out and to not get the exposure that they potentially deserve. And so I think one of the reasons why this podcast, and we're a financial planning business, but ultimately probably the lion's share of our conversations on this podcast are more about community, is to actually give a voice and to boost the signal of organisations like yourself, so that other organisations, whether it be through the likes of P500 or the other businesses, other corporates, can actually get involved. Because I mean, everyone has a story about. Everyone knows someone who's gone through something challenging, whether it be as an adult or as a child. And so I think there's a great opportunity for people to connect through organisations like Cottage by the Sea. Are there any? You mentioned the corporate world could potentially be a little bit more involved in funding. In terms of people, what do you need in terms of people resources, if any, at Cottage by the Sea? Is there a need for volunteers? Is there a need? You're looking for particular staff, or are you perfectly well staffed and equipped to deal with all the programs that you've got happening at the moment?
Good questions. There's a few in there to unpack, I guess. Let's start with the staff. We're always looking for good quality new program members. So if there's anybody out there listening to this that does have a program side of their professional career, if they're passionate and working with children, then we'd be interested to hear from them. So that's the area, and we're growing. I don't know if we've even got into the conversation about the growing need now, and we're lucky enough to have half of our funding taken care of to rebuild the Riptide Motel. Hopefully starting that end of this year, starting next year, but that will bring another 700 children through a year. That will need to be funded, and it will need to be staffed. Biggest area we need to do that is bring in new staff members, whether that's casual, part-time or full-time. Many of that contingent like to be casual, which is absolutely fine by us. The more casuals, good quality casual program staff members that we have, the better, certainly for securing the future for the children. Other ways you can be involved, we would love to hear from you, just to get our e-newsletters. You know, it's only a couple of times a year, and you get those amazing stories that I've not really told you any of these stories, but every single week we've got another story from another child or another returning adult who was here years and years ago, and we're lucky enough to see these often, and we'll share those with you in the e-news. I think that's a great way to get involved. Jump on the website, come to the annual fair in January. That's another great way to get some incredible produce.
What do you do at the fair? What's the fair? What happens at the fair in January?
We've got stalls everywhere. I think it's I said this to you before. I think it's the second Saturday in January, so right at the start of the year during the holidays. We'll have 2,000 or 3,000 people come through the gates. There's lots of different stalls. A main one, a big draw card, is Harvey's of Heightons. Glyn Harvey brings in a semi-trailer load of fruit and veg, and it's sold as fresh as you're ever going to get. It's wonderful stuff. In fact, somebody paid $5,000 for a mango last year.
Oh, nice.
Which was to take us over a certain point, which was our largest fair fundraiser ever. So I've sort of talked my way off. How did you jump on board and get involved, or was it the annual fair?
Yeah, the annual fair. We were talking about what the annual fair actually entails. So
you can have a tour around Cottage as well. It's an incredible facility, best in the country for who it serves. So you'll have a tour. Yeah, you can walk around, just have some scones, Devonshire tea, and buy yourself some fruit and veg.
Can you go back to something you just said about the facility that you're renovating or that you're developing, and what it's for and what that growing need actually is? Yeah,
so I did briefly mention that the main cottage went under a major renovation in 2020. Timing was perfect. We weren't allowed to run overnight camps at the time. In fact, an interesting fact on that was that we got the clearance to run overnight camps 1 week in November. We got the occupancy permit for the new building on that Friday, and the first children came through the doors on the Monday.
Wow.
After the weekend. And that's because we kept that engagement up with the schools and the communication. We knew we were getting close, and we knew the government must release the ban on overnight camps as well, and it came together superbly. So the building is phenomenal. And as I said, there's been 1,500-1,600 children have come through there this year. Phase 2 of our major works is the Riptide Motel. Have you heard Vance Joy sang a song called Riptide?
I certainly have. Yep.
The name Riptide it was from the fact that he stayed there as an 8-year-old on his family holidays. Obviously, it was a big hit. Taylor Swift, we've just written to Taylor Swift's management actually to see if we can get her to come and get involved as well. Because Vance Joy recently sent us a significant amount of money to go towards the refurb of that building to make it an equivalent, smaller version, but another cottage by the sea, which will invite another 700 children.
So is this the one just out the front of the cottage?
Just the one outside the front, northwest corner.
So it's not quite being used in the same aspect as a cottage at the minute, and it will be moving towards that?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, subject to funding and subject to staffing. Hopefully completed that project by the end of next year, so the end of 24. It's not really being utilised to the maximum of its capability because we're restricted to only having 12 people at a time in that big building because of fire restrictions. And it's across 5 levels. It does have a bit of asbestos in there. So it's challenging to be able to use that facility properly. We did start a respite program during COVID as well, and we've kept that going. And that's with amazing partner organisations through the Geelong community. Bring families to us. We've got a family in there at the moment. Can't get into the details of why they're there, but they're having an amazing holiday with 3 kids, mum and 3 kids.
Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned it earlier, about how people get involved, particularly kids. Cottage by the Sea isn't a walk-up service. You're not at the moment in a position to accept people walking in. They have to come either via a school
or organisation.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the way our model works. There have been times we've had phone calls and we have sought to help those individuals, whether they've been forced into a family situation of living on a couch, struggling for food, struggling for money. We have actually been able to help those people out. One girl came to our attention, for example. I won't say anything that's identifying, but as an 8-year-old, sadly, her teeth were rotten down to the stump. It's not something we normally do on an individual basis, but through our incredible community network, we've touched on that already, that we're very lucky enough to know a lot of people now in the communities around who want to give. It is incredibly giving community. Through one of those people, all of her teeth needs into adulthood, into a secondary teeth will be taken care of now. That's life-changing right there. So that was an individual that we helped, and it's not part of the model. So it isn't, ideally, it's not a stroll-up model, but we have had calls from time to time. Usually groups will come to us as a group. So as a school group or as an organisation, in one way or another. Yeah.
Are there particular schools that you have very good relationships with? Are you trying to broaden that exposure into schools even further, or are you capped out in terms of capacity with your exposure to schools?
At the moment, we are really busy with. We're inundated with requests to come to us. People know the program works. I'll get to Deakin again in a second, doing the work on our impact, which will be able to further our reach into philanthropy and donors, hopefully, but to show what impact you're actually achieving. But we are at capacity. We could be booked for many years in advance, but with the Riptide facility opening up in a little over a year and a half's time, another 700 kids a year, so that will give more opportunities to more schools. But some schools have come to us for many years, every year.
Let's talk a little bit about Deakin. You were going to touch on that just briefly about the opportunity with Deakin.
Yeah, so we're really lucky. We've got memorandums of understanding with both the Gordon Institute and Deakin University. Professor Ian Martin, the VC at Deakin, has been on site. He seems to have a real passion as well for disadvantage and children, and we're lucky that relationship has grown. It's just produced its first research piece on our Take a Break, the difference that Take a Break actually makes. And they've just started now. Amazing team there in their research department has just started their second research piece, which is on what happens beyond Cottage. How far does it reach into families, communities, and so on.
Sorry, I was going to say, with you touch on families, these are often kids that come from bad circumstances, but at sometimes the families do need that respite as well, and not having the duties of being a parent for a weekend or a week at a time can be really good respite. Where do you see that? I suppose it's going to come out in that research, but where do you see that, and do you get feedback from families and parents and so on saying how good it has been for them in particular?
Yeah, in 2019 we had Social Ventures Australia did a research piece on the work at Cottage as well, and they did find that it does reach in to the families, and it does actually give them that break and gives them an opportunity to reset, and a happy child means a happier household as well. But to speak about specifics, I am going to have to wait until the Deakin research piece comes out as well later hopefully within 10 months.
Other than confirming what you know anecdotally, what is the hope with the research? You mentioned that it potentially broadens the opportunity for funding and philanthropy? There's
a lot of amazing organisations out there doing amazing things across a whole plethora of needed work. Everybody's got an ask, and it's right for the donor to have faith and trust that their dollar is reaching where they need it to reach. So Deakin Research is recognised worldwide now, and we're really lucky to have them doing this for us, because once you've got a body of work, we've just received the first research piece, when we've got this deeper body of work into the impact of what we do and how far it does reach, that will absolutely help us explain, not anecdotally, explain from a research perspective, an independent research piece, that will talk to more people and it will bring more money into the organisation, which is needed.
Yeah, it's of all the organisations that we've spoken to, I think that you're probably alone in having that research in play. Mm-hmm. Again, one of the challenges in marketing, because that's what we're doing, marketing and promoting organisations, is moving beyond the anecdotal and moving beyond the personal experience. It's good, it's important, word of mouth is essential, but ultimately you to broaden that, you need the data.
Yeah, you're right. It's stories, and then hard evidence, and that comes from what we're doing now with Deakin.
Adam, we've been going for about 40 minutes now. Is there anything else that you'd like to touch on in relation to Cottage, either events coming up, programs of note?
Projects of note. Anything coming up for Cottage?
Oh, look, we've got the annual fair in January, so I think this goes out in about 4 weeks, doesn't it? So the Winter Warmers that's coming up would have been something we could have promoted, but look out for Winter Warmers next year. It's a great opportunity for individuals to get together and have some fun and raise $500, $1,000, $2,000, whatever that may be, for a group of mates on your street or your footy mates or a team or whatever it is. So keep an eye out for that for next year maybe. Come to the annual fair, jump on the website, cottagebythesea.com.au. I've not actually mentioned the amazing ambassadors we've got. I just saw a note on my side there.
Let's do it. Let's give them a shout out.
Shall we say that?
Yeah,
so
go for it.
We're lucky enough to have an incredible body of local ambassadors, business people who are so passionate about helping us and spreading the word. But we've also got Joel Selwood, Patrick Dangerfield, Rod Laver, Ian Cover and Curtis Stone are all ambassadors and passionate and have all been on site. Rod not in my time, but have all been on site. When Joel Selwood popped in just after you won the flag, so deserved. I'm so pleased. I'm not a Geelong supporter myself, which I did tell him at the time, but he came to meet a bunch of kids on site and we went to questions. And the first question, sorry Joel, but it is true. The first question he was asked, did you play lawn bowls? And he just retired, and I guess you fall quickly. Anyway, Joel and the others, they're all fantastic support for us as well. Beck Madden, local girl, is a great new patron who took over from Frank Costa, the late Frank Costa, as I said, and Frank was great while he was part of our team.
Now, organisations, I'm sure you've got a bunch of organisations that support regularly. Do you want to give any of those a shout out? It's probably too many to mention, is there?
There is a lot, and there's quite a few organisations and individuals that prefer to stay under the radar. I know some of them are popping into mind straight away, so I think I better be careful on that shout out.
You do actually, people can actually go to the website. I saw earlier, I'm just trying to find it now, where you actually have a list for the previous financial year, the major parties, major donors, major trusts. There's some bequests and estates that have left funds to Cottage by the Sea. So that's probably a great place to go and have a look at. I was surprised at just how many different individuals, organisations are keen to support.
Yep, that's right.
Anything else, Adam, before we let you go?
No, thanks for having me, guys. Great to be here at Burke Britain, and can't wait to see you next week.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're keen to understand more about how financial advice could benefit you, follow us on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter at Burke Britain FP, or Google Burke Britain Financial Partners. Check out our client reviews, testimonials, and make a time to meet one of our certified financial planners by clicking Book Now on our website. Thanks for listening.
Any information contained in this podcast is of a general nature only. No account was taken as to the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. Therefore, before making any decision, listeners should consider the appropriateness of any information with regard to their particular objective, financial situation, needs, and seek independent advice from a licensed professional specific to their circumstances.
All right, hit it.
That translates to don't be a moron and act on what some random person says on a podcast. Take personal responsibility, do your homework, ask questions, and speak to an actual human that knows what they're talking about before you do anything. PP Financial Solutions Proprietary Limited, trading as Burke Britain Financial Partners, are authorised representatives of AMP Financial Planning Limited, AFS, licence number 232706.